Yeah, indeed, it is maybe not a surprise that Allegra Stratton, who is an advisor to the Prime Minister, was his press secretary at the time when that video was filmed last year, has resigned. Are we going to see further aheads? Possibly, probably, I would suggest, and that may be before that investigation by the Cabinet Secretary is concluded, though we've no timescale on whether that may happen. Of course, this is all about the possibility that there was a party in Downing Street last year which may well have broken the rules. Of course, the rules at the time suggesting that social gatherings, Christmas parties, were essentially not allowed. Well, Allegra Stratton has made a pretty emotional statement outside her house in the last couple of minutes. I'll just talk you through what she said. She said that my remarks seemed to make light of the rules which people were doing everything to obey. That was never my intention. I will regret those marks for the rest of my days. I offer my profound apologies to all of you at home for them. She goes on to say that to all of you who have lost loved ones and who endured intolerable loneliness and struggle with your businesses, I'm truly sorry. And this afternoon, I'm offering my resignation to the Prime Minister. So Allegra Stratton having to resign over this incident, but many questions do still remain about what precisely went on here on the 18th of December, but also, it must be said, Alex, about other potential parties that took place in Downing Street in November when the UK or England was in lockdown, and in December too, and questions about potentially was the Prime Minister in attendance at any of those parties. And all this comes, of course, while there is still speculation that further restrictions could now be imposed in England in the days to come. Just to say that you can probably pick up that there are protesters beyond the gates here in Downing Street raising a hell of a racket, playing party songs in protest about what may have gone on last year. And I think maybe some of the anger, maybe not necessarily amongst the public, who will be angered and upset maybe about the fact that a party took place here in Downing Street, but amongst the Conservative Party themselves, is that Downing Street the Prime Minister has spent the last week essentially denying that there was any party in number 10 and that all rules were obeyed. And now we've ended up in a situation where Allegra Stratton, his advisor, has resigned over making light about a party, and he's asked the Cabinet Secretary to launch an investigation into the party. I think, i.e., we conclude there probably was a party in Downing Street last year, and we're going to find out, either from the Cabinet Secretary or the police indeed, who are also investigating this, about whether the rules were broken indeed.
I mean, this is rather extraordinary, isn't it? Because one would assume if there was a party that happened in 10 Downing Street, the Prime Minister would know. Maybe he wasn't invited at the time. No one can be sure of that until we get some sort of truth. But he must have known from those working with him that that party took place. And yet there's been ongoing denials. Is Boris Johnson's scalp itself up for grabs right now, do you think? Is this all part of ongoing faction fighting as well, both in the wider Tory party and in 10 Downing Street?
Yeah, I'm not at all sure. In fact, I would say I don't think this is going to be a resigning issue for the Prime Minister. Notable, of course, that the Labour Party, who've been vociferous in attacking the Prime Minister today, have not called for him to resign, though the SNP have. Now, the Prime Minister himself, you're right, when you come to Downing Street, it's a pretty big building, it must be said. He's got a flat where he actually lives above number 11, but he's got a flat in this building. Is he aware potentially of all the functions that take place in it? Probably not, to be fair to the Prime Minister, Alex. There are an awful lot of functions and events that do take place, either with him not there or without his knowledge. His defence for what he's been saying over the last week is that he has sought assurances that no party was held here and that no rules were broken, and that he has had those assurances. In fact, he repeated that today. What has immediately led to Allegra Stratton's resignation is that video, which he said he was furious and sickened about, that it seemed to make light of COVID restrictions. But yeah, the bigger questions about whether there were more parties inside number 10, maybe even inside the Prime Minister's flat itself, well, those questions very much remain to the fore. In terms of the wider Conservative Party, and I've spoken to an awful lot of Conservative MPs today, they are also flipping furious, if I'm honest, about the fact that they have yet again ended up talking about the government scoring an own goal in all of this. They wish the Prime Minister had been more open about this earlier, and there are seriously concerned that this is doing reputational damage to the Prime Minister, but to the government at large, that the public out there will be pretty angry that while they obeyed the rules, some of the Prime Minister's team may not have done. And also that opens up wider questions about if there are going to be further restrictions imposed on all of this, will compliance be as strong as it has been throughout the pandemic? And that is why the politics, in many ways, of this spill into real life about why this is a really important fundamental issue. And I think we can see Allegra Stratton there, pretty distressed, tearful, in fact, making that statement outside her home a little earlier in the last hour or so, in which she offered her resignation to the Prime Minister. Difficult time for many involved in this, but as I say, this is where the politics bleeds into the reality, where there will be concern that when the Prime Minister and others call on all of us to comply with further rules in the days and weeks to come in the lead up to Christmas, that many may feel that actually it is one rule for politicians, for the Prime Minister, for others, and another rule for all of us at home. And that might make compliance a bit more difficult, which could be very tricky given the fears around the transmissibility of this new variant.